Monday that the U.S. will apply an additional 50% tariff on imports from China if that country moves forward with its plan to impose a retaliatory 34% fee on American products. Several world leaders are ready to come to the table with offers, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel faces a 17% tax. The European Union will end tariffs on U.S. cars and industrial goods if the U.S. returns the favor. Still, global markets posted their third day of losses Monday amid looming fears of a recession. The owners of this toy store in New Jersey had to dip into their savings to get ahead of the possible downturn.
It feels right now that small businesses are being abandoned.
Powerful investors and average Americans alike on edge ahead of Wednesday's tariff deadline. Naomi Ruckham, CBS News.
And joining us now is economics professor Roger Tutterow. Roger, talk to me a little bit about the conversations that you are hearing. And this has really taken over a lot of folks' minds as they're watching the stock market and economists raising their own flags. What are the conversations that you have heard in your inner circles?
Yeah, I think most economists would say that they are free traders, that we believe in the power of the market to improve welfare for most households and businesses. But I think that we also acknowledge that the playing field needs to be level. And so I think the intention of the president is to put tariffs in place to try to level that playing field. Personally, my guess is that they are really, a large part of them will be a negotiating tactic to get concessions from countries on the other side. Obviously, if you're using it in that way, you can't come right out and say, oh, these are just temporary. I think that it's fair to say that a lot of the unrest is also reflected in the stock market. We've seen a lot of volatility, some really big intraday swings, and I think that's got some households concerned. But we typically say to people that they want to invest for the longer horizon, and it's tough to try to time when to get in and out of the market. I would think for the middle class and lower middle class households in terms of income strata, there's fair to be concerned about what does the tariff mean to me in terms of higher prices. Keep in mind that tariffs aren't going to get pushed through the system overnight. I mean, it takes a while for the effect to work its way through the supply chain. But particularly when we think about the grocery bill, things like fruits and vegetables, where a lot of the product is imported, you may see some upward pressure on prices if, in fact, the tariffs go and stay in place for a prolonged period.
And Professor, we've heard from the Trump administration, from the president himself, saying that his intentions here are to protect domestic industries, shrink the federal deficit. He says this will lead to that. And then on the other hand, you have folks, throwing around the word recession. So as someone who's watching the news cycle of hearing all of this commentary, I mean, what do you make of it? What is the middle ground of where we are at right now?
Well, the president's ability to put tariffs in place really hinges upon one of two strategies. Either defend the tariff as protecting a national security interest. We saw some of that discussion done with regard to Canada and Mexico several weeks ago, or point out the tariff as a way to correct imbalances in the playing field, if you will, with regard to specific industries. My guess is that you're going to see the president get concessions from a lot of countries. Obviously, the last 2 days, we've heard stories about Israel, about Japan, about the European Union, all wanting to have discussions again about how to get the tariffs removed. And what we hope is the final result of this is we come away with a more free trade system where tariffs are reduced on both sides. Now, that having been said, there are people that work in industries where foreign competition has been a challenge for them. And so I understand why they may see tariffs as being a way to protect their industry. At the end of the day, though, tariffs probably are not going to completely reverse the effects of global competition. In economics, we talk about countries producing that have the goods that they have a comparative advantage in, and that's not something that's likely to be completely reversed by any kind of economic policy.
And talking about these new tariffs while looking at previous tariffs, is this being implemented in a traditional way?
Well, we've actually had, if anything, kind of a general trend toward freer trade over the past several decades. We do know that early in his first term, President Trump looked at some tariffs, in particular focused on industries that he felt like were disadvantaged. But I don't think, or I hope at least, this is not the beginning of a long upward trajectory of a tariff war. And so the best thing that can happen is for everybody to make concessions, to bring the tariffs back down and try to have truly free and fair trade between countries.
I want to talk for a moment about individuals that could feel this in really big ways. Low-income families, for example, that are navigating their food and energy bill and straining budgets. I mean, what can they do as we're headed into these upcoming weeks and months, as soon as Wednesday, when some of these tariffs will be implemented?
Well, again, there will likely be a lag between when the tariffs are actually implemented and when the higher prices show up at the stores. Again, on the food side, you've got some areas like the fruits and vegetables where the imports are very important, but you've got areas like the grains and like proteins, like beef, where a lot of the consumption comes from domestic sources. So there, the tariffs are going to be less problematic. On the energy side, it'll be interesting. What we have been seeing is a downward trajectory for oil prices. We're below $60 per gallon for crude oil as of the middle of this week. And so that should eventually show up as lower prices of gasoline at the pump.
How urgent should folks be right now, hearing that there is a delay before they're going to start to feel an immediate impact on their wallet?
Well, again, I try to discourage people from doing any kind of hoarding in any situation. But there may be people that go out and buy now in anticipation of a higher price later. But ultimately, I think most people are just going to have to understand that this is a very fluid situation. That's why the financial markets are so volatile. These are policy positions that are changing in real time, in part due to the response we get from our trading partners.
For the individual spender that is navigating all of this, any advice and takeaways for them as we're exiting this conversation?
Well, as always is the case, it's to try to maintain composure, not to panic, to understand that prices of goods fluctuate for a variety of reasons, and in this case, it may be for some goods they fluctuate because of the tariffs put in place. But again, my bet today is that most of the tariffs will not be long-term components to policy.
We're joined by Kennesaw State University Professor of Economics, Roger Tutterow. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts, sir, before we let you go?
No, again, I think calmness is always the key.
Certainly, and we will continue to keep you up to date on the latest in the free Atlanta News First app.